Ja, danke Oliver für die sehr tolle Vorstellung. Danke auch an die Veranstalter für diese Möglichkeit hier zu sprechen. Ich würde auch versuchen, mich selber hier durchzuklicken. Ja, wunderbar. Ich würde sehr gerne trotz meiner jetzt knapp 8 Jahre in Deutschland diesen Vortrag auf Englisch halten. Ich hoffe, dass es für alle in Ordnung ist. Ich fühle mich einfach wohl in meiner Muttersprache und ich bin kein Fan von Fremdschämen. Ich fühle mich einfach wohl, wenn ich auf Englisch spreche. Es wird aber die Gelegenheit geben, am Ende noch Verständnisfragen zu stellen. So, this is me speaking English. I maybe wanted to just talk a little bit about where I come from and who I am, because it's strange for me to talk in front of a room full of producers, journalists, filmmakers, because I myself, I didn't study journalism, I didn't study filmmaking. At university I studied literature and philosophy, German and French. We read Goethe and Heine. And I actually ended up in Berlin because I was studying at the Humboldt University. I later went on to start working at Vice because I quit after 1 semester and went around to Vice one day because I found the magazine at a party. I was taking a break from the festivities on the toilet of this particular house party, and I saw a copy of the magazine lying around, which I recognized from England. And I looked up in the front of the magazine, the Impressum. I don't know why. I opened on that page, and I thought it was coincidence that I happened to be looking at the address of a company which I'd always admired from England. And the office happened to be 100 meters away from where I was living at the time. So the next day, I promised myself that evening that this wouldn't have been in vain, no matter how hungover I may be the next day, that I would go around and introduce myself to the Geschäftsführer of this Zeitschrift. I did that and I became the first editorial intern at Vice Germany. There were 5 people working in the office back then. And very quickly we grew into what is now Vice Media Worldwide. We call ourselves a media company. And in this presentation I'm going to be trying to explain a little bit about the company, a little bit about where we come from. The magazine is obviously kind of our root. It's where we grew from. We've grown very quickly over the last 10 years. And in particular in the digital and online arena. So if I can show you this is the second issue of Vice, founded in Montreal in '94 by 3 guys who were unemployed at the time and realized they could get money from the state to publish their own magazine. They published this fanzine. It was called The Voice of Montreal back then. And really, Montreal, I don't know if you've ever been there or are familiar with the politics in Canada, but it was very easy to get funding if you said you were doing something cultural. And that's pretty much what they did. They went in and said, look, we want to do a magazine for young people. We are young people. We're interested in stuff that you don't necessarily know about. But we think it's worthwhile to bring the stories that we want to explain, the stories of young people, to an audience. We want to reach young people with a magazine. And that impulse, that proposition is still at the core of what we do. We're a DIY company. We believe in trying things out, experimenting, failing very often, but on the back of it, learning a lot. And it's kind of also the way my career has developed. I started making films for Vice back in 2005. After 6 months of working for the company, I was put in front of a camera and told to interview techno DJs. I don't like techno. I've never interviewed anyone before on camera, but suddenly I was meeting Richie Houghton in Berlin and having to talk to him about the Compact tour, a multimedia tour he was doing of Japan at the time. It went okay. And the series was a big success. We were doing it for Intel back then. But long story short, this is where the magazine started, a fanzine from Montreal about skating, doing drugs, and punk music. And this is where the magazine is today. This is the issue that Oliver mentioned. It's probably one of the best issues I think we've ever produced. It's, as Oliver said, been nominated for, it's won several awards this year. We dropped the O. Sounded better. And although the magazine might look different, it's still free. We believe that's very important. And that kind of is also at the heart of what we do online. We don't charge anyone for anything. There's no such thing as Vice Plus, where you have to pay a little bit to get the good stuff. It's all free, and we also publish stuff on other channels. You know, we want to get our content out there. So, as you'll see later, we embrace YouTube as our friends. We want our content to be there. We want people to watch it. And we want people to talk about the stories that we produce. This slide is actually a little bit misleading. This is not where the company is today. The magazine is a small part of what we do, a very small part now. We are, as I said at the beginning, no longer just a magazine. We're a media company. This is an attempt to kind of summarize. I don't know if you can see this. So the magazine, as you see at the top, is just part of an array of services we offer, of publications. I guess the most important for this discussion is the Vice.com and Vice TV. These are our own publishing platforms. Vice.com, we concentrate on, our focus is on Bewegtbild, on videos. We have a film department. I'll be showing some examples of films that we've produced later. We also run events through our creative agency called Virtue. So we work together with brands, producing content for them and marketing solutions. We also have a record label. We produce books, and it always gets left to last, but advice is a very important part of our business. It's how we distribute our content. It's a network of different websites, platforms, and also individual people who seed our content, who publish it, who push it, who talk about it. And it helps us expand and, as I said, reach way more people than we could on our own, and way more people than we do with the magazine. This is a world map. The countries that are in red have Vice offices. We're in 35 offices now around the world, and we have over 4,000 full-time staff working for us. We concentrate on online and video content. That is our bread and butter. It's what we do. And as I said before, we're talking to young people. We are very young. We want to tell stories by young people and for young people. So in marketing speak, I stole this slide from a marketing presentation. They call it Gen Y. Just to give you a little insight into how we do that, the process that's involved in the way we produce videos. As I said before, we have a creative pool of 4,000 international employees. These are journalists, writers, photographers, filmmakers, artists, in the broadest sense. People who are all pitching stories, people who all have ideas. We like to talk to each other a lot. We exchange ideas, new stories, sometimes very funny stories that we couldn't publish. These stories are then they get selected by editors like me, and then go into production. We have over 500 video producers and editors or cutters working for us, who have produced since the start of Vice TV. It used to be called VBS TV, but Vice TV, over 1,000 hours of content. These 1,000 hours of content are then shipped over to our development team. We have a team who produce new players and platforms, so our content gets the best presentation possible and the most web-compatible presentation. Something that's very important and often neglected. I really don't like to say this, but the ZDF Mediathek is not the greatest online player, I think. I think you'd agree. We had a problem, I'll talk about it later, while Germany was a show that, as mentioned, that we developed for ZDF. We had a problem, we got a lot of good feedback by email, which is very strange for us. We don't get a lot of feedback by email. But while Germany, there were a lot of people writing us mails saying, oh, that's a great show I saw last night, but where can I find it? And we said, oh, the Mediathek, just go on the Mediathek and find it. It turned out you couldn't actually find it on the Mediathek until 10:30, because it was considered too adult in terms of content. So it just shows how important the presentation of content is, the player. So we have our own team that develops that. We're now partnered up with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the rest. We worked closely together with them in partnerships to decide how we can best distribute our content, what kind of format we should be looking at, what kind of lengths, what kind of selection of content that should be put together, that should be displayed next to each other. All of these things kind of work in promoting our content on the one hand, like getting out to more people, but also once we have someone watching a show of ours, we want them to watch the next show and the next show and the next show. And so the cooperation that we have with these media companies and these social media companies allow us to better refine the user experience off-site. We also have, as I mentioned, Advice is a network of different platforms and sites. I have a lot of slides to go, so I'm going to hurry up. Advice is a collection of different websites and partners that we work together with, where we publish our content. We also promote our content on different sites, so we can have banner ads, short pre-rolls, which run before their original content, which also promote kind of the Vice shows. And finally, we have blogs that actually feature our stuff as well. This is the next thing is a short video that tries to explain the entire story of Vice in, I think, 3 minutes.
Shane Smith is here. He is the co-founder and CEO of the international media company Vice. He wants Vice to be the next CNN, the next ESPN, and the next MTV digitally. We've also said you want to be the Time Warner of the street. We already are the Time Warner of the street.
Vice magazine, started in Montreal in 1994, has become a global empire. You got Vice.com, international network of digital channels, a TV production studio, a record label, an in-house creative service, an agency. If you describe the Vice brand, what is it?
Vice is the voice of a generation, the world's first truly global, all-digital youth media company. Every day, Vice delivers hours of online original video covering the news, culture, and entertainment that defines the world we live in.
Everyone was investing platform, money in the platform, but no one was saying, well, where are we going to fill that pipe with?
Vice is a network of channels, each geared to the passions of young people today. The Creators Project is a visionary celebration of cutting-edge art and creativity.
This is for the globe.
Noisy is the most exciting, original, and inspiring music channel on the web.
We got music right in our pocket.
Motherboard documents the present and future of science and technology. And Fightland brings you inside MMA, the fastest growing sport in the world. Thump is a total immersion into a worldwide phenomenon, electronic dance music. And Munchings is defining a new era in food culture. Real food, real people, real fun.
So good.
The newest channel in the growing Vice family is News. Vice News is an honest, immersive, first-person account of a changing world. Vice is opening offices around the globe as fast as traditional news agencies are closing theirs. Our reporters are on the ground, telling the stories that matter most in a language that young people understand and trust.
Young people today have been marketed to since they were newborns. They've developed the most sophisticated rope detectors of all time. And the only way to circumvent that rope detector is to not look. The people who shoot it have to be young. The people who cut it have to be young. The hosts have to be young. So if something is created in the boardroom, it will not work.
Vice and the Vice Network, along with new partnerships with YouTube, Facebook and Twitter, are reaching over 200 million young people every month, delivering hundreds of hours of original video and creating unprecedented levels of deep engagement.
There's a changing of the guard every generation in media, and we are the changing of the guard for journalism.
Very modest. That was cut by my American colleagues, as you can probably tell. Nevertheless, I hope it gives you an impression of kind of all the stuff we do and the look and feel of our content. This is an overview of where we are right now. So we began with the brand Vice, and then similar to very large TV stations, when getting into the digital TV arena, we realized that it would make more sense for us to have our own channels. We call them verticals. They're basically websites which specialize in different areas of interest, different genres. So we have Noisy. These are the ones that are running right now. We have Noisy for music. We have a tech site called Motherboard. We have an art site called Creates Project. Fightland is a little bit strange. It's about MMA fighting. It came together in the States with a large sponsorship deal. That's another thing. These channels are often funded by brands. That doesn't mean they get to say what's in the content. It means that they want to improve their brand image. We're very careful when working together with brands and kind of in content cooperations. The Creators Project is a good example. That was also funded by Intel at the very beginning. So brands give us a lot of money to produce a lot of amazing content, which then makes their brand look better and gets their brand awareness up in the Zielgruppe, so amongst young people. Thump is a nightlife electronic music channel. Next year, just to skip through, probably the most exciting one is Vice News. We're launching that this year in November. We have a fashion channel coming up, food, sports, photography, gaming, travel, comedy, research, and something called e-commerce. That's the plan. Just to give you an impression of the people we reach, how big our audience is, we have now over 15 million visitors, unique visitors on our websites every month on our own platforms. With the corporations we have within our network, that means over 200 million people that we reach every month. That audience, we did a recent survey, it took about 6 months, a worldwide survey of who's actually on our websites, who's looking at our content. 90% of those people are between 18 and 34. Another interesting kind of development that we found from this user survey, the growth of mobile consumption of our content is 500% in the last, I think, 3 years. No, in the last year. And interestingly, Oliver mentioned it, the Verweildauer, like, so how long are people actually watching our content? We were surprised, 9 minutes online content is the average time that people actually stay tuned to our stuff, which for a mobile device is kind of strange. We were always getting told, no, mobile stuff has to be shorter, it has to be snappy, it needs to be clips, you know. But this would suggest the opposite. As long as the content's good, young people will watch it. We have over 90 million people on our social media platforms, and kind of my favorite one, because I come from the content side of things, people watch our content on average on our own platforms for over 20 minutes. That's long form content, I should mention. That's everything above 30 minutes. The average time that people stay and tuned is over 20 minutes. So it kind of goes against a belief that young people have a short attention span. They just want to be entertained for 10 seconds and then jump to something else, zap around in different channels. If the story is good and told in a smart and clever way that talks to young people, they'll stay on the site. This is kind of a summary of what we do. So Vice is the brand that's responsible for creating content. We then activate it and distribute it via Advice, our larger network, and the conversation of that content takes place on social media sites such as Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and even Instagram. Not so much in Germany, but in other parts of the world. It's true. One thing that's kind of interesting about this, it allows me to explain something. When we're talking to German TV stations, which we do quite a lot, about new formats, about how to reach a younger audience, one of the kind of big discussions right now or in the last couple of months was like, how do you take the input of users? So this conversation here, what people think about your content, how does that influence the creation part? Like, how can we feed the conversation, the feedback from users back into our content to make sure that we're appealing to the right audience? We don't necessarily think about it like that. It sounds a little strange, but we don't. Because, as Shane said in the video, one of the founders of Vice, we are young. We're young people. We're used to our whole lives doing this all the time. We're there constantly. It's not, we don't consider it an us and them. It's not like, oh, the young people, what do the young people think? For us, it's just kind of part of our job. We're constantly connected to our audience. We know exactly what they think, or at least what they're willing to tell us about our stuff. So it's less of a kind of constructed feedback schleifer that we have to use. It's just part of our daily work. And this slide is slightly funny and embarrassing, but also makes a point. This is the Redaktion, this is the editorial department in our Berlin office. The average age is 27, which puts us slap bang in the middle of the, they're funny pictures, right? Slap bang in the middle of our audience group, our target group of 19 or 18 to 34. It would be much younger if it wasn't for our music editor, this scary looking guy with a beard who's like 50. Yeah. I'm also slightly older, I'm 28, so that means I'm old in Vice terms. And what I was saying about the fact that we grow up in this conversation, we're constantly there, is reflected in kind of the way we think about our content. We think about it as social currency. It's what, I don't like saying this, young people, or even worse, junge Menschen, it's kind of, content becomes a social currency. It's what I share with my friends, it's how I tell them all of the great stuff that I know, or for example, how much I care about the environment. Then I share a documentary about the environment. You know? This has led to our content being, like, we have 7 times more referrals to our sites from Facebook than any other media outlet. It also means that we have a 55% higher engagement rate. That means like comments and likes per view are much higher on Vice sites than anywhere else. It also means that when we partner up with channels like YouTube to get our stuff out there, and YouTube's a great example, it's so easy to use, it's become the home of online content, I would say, for young people. It was a no-brainer for us to get involved with YouTube. It's also a great place to get user feedback. Some of that user feedback is pointless. Great film is okay. Hated the bit with the girl is maybe not the greatest feedback. Or like, we get a lot, there's a lot of trolling. You just have to wade through that. Like or you can choose not to, It depends how much you take it seriously. I think for us, the most important thing that comes out of YouTube and our collaboration is the analysis from YouTube of how many people are on our page, when they're watching our stuff, what time, how long, who they are. All of that stuff helps us better understand who we're talking to. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to change the content that we make, but it definitely influences how we distribute it. There are some impressive figures here about how successful our YouTube channel is. We partnered up with them 18 months ago. We launched our Vice channel. We have since then over 500 million views of our content. We have over 4 million subscribers. That puts us in the top 0.1% of the monthly subscription growth rate. And my favorite thing, the engagement. As I said before, like likes per view, comments per view, shares per view. We're in the top by YouTube in the premium bracket, they call it. So that's a little bit about the company and how we distribute content. This is a Stoffentwicklungsmeeting, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the content itself. What does it look like? I don't talk at these sort of things very often, but when I do, I have the feeling that I should present a formula about how this whole thing works. You know, you do A and B and C, and then a little bit of D, and maybe you do a bit of E at the end, and then you're going to have a successful show. There is no way to do that. I'm sorry to disappoint you. We don't know either. We experiment with stuff. We try things out. I'm going to list the stuff that we think about when commissioning shows, when editing shows, when producing shows, things that are important to us, questions that we ask ourselves, boxes that we try and tick if possible. What is a Vice story is the question I get asked probably more than any other question by journalists, strangers, friends. What is a Vice story? I have no idea. I do have an idea. I can't give you a clear answer. What I tried to do was just to give you an impression, if you don't know Vice or haven't been on our website recently. These are 9 stories that we ran last month. The top right, we've got a story about Bulgarians setting themselves on fire to protest against the civil injustice in their country, about the high level of corruption in parliament. The next one is a story about the internet's most famous cat and his friends. The next one over is about a Dutch guy called Arjan, who is the self-proclaimed king of cannabis, and about his travels to Colombia to find 3 very, very rare seeds, which he then takes back to Holland, grows in huge warehouses, and sells to the rest of the world. Here's another drug story. It's about a new drug on the rise, a kind of crystal meth stimulant that was, we noticed after the austerity measures in Greece, was drastically on the rise. It's called CISA. The next one over is a German thing about a gangster rapper who's an actual gangster who robbed a gold transporter, I think 5 years ago. We visited in prison and hung out with him for a day. The next one over is a documentary that I made about the darknet, the hidden web, basically the portion of the internet which is not visible or accessible via search engines. It's a place where criminals hang out, but also freedom fighters, whistleblowers. So interesting kind of, rechtsfreien Raum, I guess you'd call it, which on the one hand, promotes criminality, makes it possible, but at the same time also makes it possible for people like Edward Snowden to tell us that, the NSA is spying on everyone. The final one down here is about a group of Mennoniten in Bolivia in which men were raping the women at night. They would break in. They used a cow tranquilizer to break into their friends and community houses. They would pump the gas into the houses and then rape the women while they slept, often next to their husbands. The one in the middle is the development of 3D printable guns. There's a guy called Cody Wilson in the States who is an advocate of free guns for everyone, and you can download his prints, and if you've got a 3D printer, you can print yourself a gun, or more accurately, you can print yourself a magazine for a gun, the one component of a gun which in the States is still hard to come by unless you have a license. And then this last one is about a guy called Marcus, who travels Europe. I think he's been at home in his flat 3 days last year. The rest of the time he spends on the road visiting farms and breaking in at night to show people how terrible the agricultural industry is in Europe. We followed him for a couple of days, spent an afternoon in a field in Poland. So that kind of gives you an impression of the range of stories. What kind of unites all of these things is the way in which we tell the story. It's the Haltung or the Herangehensweise, which I'll go into a little bit later. But where do these stories come from? Well, our contributor network is large. This is an example from a film called Heavy Metal in Baghdad, which we released, I think, 2007, 2008. It was the first feature film that Vice ever produced. It started out as this. This is an interview with a band called Krasse Kauder from Baghdad in the magazine, I think back in like 2003, 2002. We did a metal issue in the States. And there was a guy who was in Baghdad actually working for MTV at the time, who'd been sent there with money from MTV to report on the music scene. He then came back with a story that MTV didn't want about Baghdad's only existing metal band. We thought it was good, so we printed it. We then actually found out that he'd recorded some of his interview with the band. We saw the footage, thought it was great, sent a camera team to go and shoot it. We came back 2 months later. The footage lay around for about, I think, 6 months. No one even looked at it. One day we hired a new editor. He was going through his Schnittkabine and he found the material and he watched the whole thing himself, went straight to one of the founders of Vice and said, "Hey, this thing you shot is amazing. It's a film." The founder, Sarush, who's also the host of this particular film, was surprised. He said, "You've got the first 2 parts, the first 2 acts of a feature film." Sarush had no idea what that meant, but he believed the guy and trusted him, so they went back and shot a 3rd part, which then became this feature film, which ran at the Berlinale, I think, in 2008. So that's kind of an idea of where stories come from. It's often people, the Syria issue is a good example. Like, where do we get stories for Syria? Well, when something like that happens, when something terrible happens in the world, there's a war, a lot of journalists go there. They're sent there by massive, massive media companies who need daily updates from the region. Those journalists, while they're doing their work, also find out about other stuff, other exciting stuff, often cultural stuff, which doesn't necessarily have, doesn't necessarily have meaning to their agenda. We get those stories, people send them to us constantly. We're in touch with journalists, they get sent to Syria to report from in front of the hotel, like this, with a microphone saying, "Today this and this happened, it's looking bad." But the rest of their time they're out there talking to people, gathering stories which then appear in our magazine and on our website. I'm going to skip the trailer to Heavy Metal in Baghdad. What's our approach? We're often called a gonzo journalist. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think gonzo is about a guy being in the middle of the story. It's not about the people around him, it's about how he, the experiences that he has. We don't do that. We use a host who's transparent to explain the situation around him. We think it's important to give a wider context. Transparency, as Shane said, young people today, they've been marketed to their whole lives. They're big bullshit detectors. If you can be honest, if you can show like how you got that interview, the way that you drove there, the discussions you had to have before with the guys who didn't want you to talk to that person, but then eventually you managed to convince them, it just adds to the story and it gives you credibility, which is invaluable with young people. We try and get involved, we try and live as the people. I'm going to show a clip now which kind of shows that. This is a poster in LA for a show called Vice on HBO. They commissioned a show last year. We ran 6 episodes. It's been nominated for an Emmy Award as Best Documentary. It is an attempt to do what we do on our website in TV. And here's a little clip which kind of explains a little bit more about it.
you're young, getting wasted and getting laid seems very important. And as you get older, other things become important. The environment or economics or what's happening with conflict in different regions that's going to affect the world. We started in Montreal, 1994. We were called Voice of Montreal. And then we moved down to New York in about 1998, 99, changed the name to Vice. We started expanding around the world. As we started expanding, we sort of came out of our cocoon and said, there's a lot of things that are happening out there. Somebody should be saying something about this. So there's about 200,000 people in the square. The police are about to come in here now, and we're going to try not to get arrested or have the city criminal.
What we want to do is tell some untold stories, and to tell untold stories that we find interesting and compelling. To feel real for the audience, it has to be real for us.
The Philippines love their guns. They named the machine gun after the president.
I think the constant in what we're looking to do with the show is keep a real desire for real stories and understanding of our place in the larger media landscape.
You go somewhere, you live with people, you try to understand them as best as possible. You have to put yourself through their full experience, but it's the easier way of actually doing what you're supposed to do, which is getting into their heads and understanding it.
Well, we're not spending all this effort, all this money, just to get a poor, nice young lady out of the country that can't feed them, there's not any opportunities for them.
It's an honest approach to documentary journalism.
This isn't necessarily the stuff people put in their paper, it's stuff that national media covers.
What you're going to see on Vice is not going to be sanitized. It's going to punch people in the face.
A short description of immersionism as the way we see it. I think Thomas, the guy at the end with the glasses, said it quite well. Journalism is about getting inside people's heads, finding out what makes them who they are. And if you can spend time with them, then you're only going to aid that discovery. Another example of kind of the immersionism thing, I think probably the most practical and direct example was a guy called Tim Pool, who recently went to Istanbul during the Gezi Park demonstrations with Google glasses. He strapped on a pair of Google glasses and reported live from Gezi Park, from Istanbul, from inside. This is an article that was featured him, which spoke about his documentary that he made. I just think the quote's very nice. That's what it's about. It's about being as direct as possible, about giving our audience the opportunity to feel as if they were there as well as you can with current technology. Haltung, I'm going to skip through this real quick. Okay, so Haltung is always the biggest discussion we have with TV stations, especially public TV stations in Germany, ZDF. I love these discussions. What is a host allowed to say? What are we allowed to say? What's the author allowed to say? The narrator of the piece. I always say, just trust young people. Trust them. Don't be dogmatic. Don't try and tell them what to think. Don't summarize everything and make it super easy for them to understand in a kind of Sendung mit der Maus kind of way. Just show them emotional stories which will engage them, which will start to make them think about stuff. And that's the great thing about the digital kind of landscape, then if they want to, they can find out, they can Google anything. In the best case, they can go on your website and find out 7 more documentaries about the same thing, which expand on that initial stuff. Be emotional, be subjective. Like I said, transparency is super important. No role play. I'm always amazed, like a lot of stuff I see on German TV, people just speak like not normal people. It's very strange, That doesn't help with your credibility. It's harder to identify. I find it hard to identify with people on German TV, not because I'm not German, but because they just don't sound like normal people. This is a show where we try to do exactly that. We've got a normal guy. This is Manuel Möglich. He doesn't have a normal name, but he's totally normal. He'd never been on TV before. We casted him. He was good looking and likable. He didn't have any experience, but we chose him because he could do something that a lot of people couldn't, which was just be himself on camera, and he was a very emotional guy, which helped. So I just want to show you one real clip, just to give you an idea of the kind of Haltung that I like, that I think is really useful and kind of productive TV shows. So we went with Manuel to Bayreuth and the area in Franken, Oberfranken. This is at the Bayreuth Festspiele. We'd heard from our online editor, funnily enough, who actually went to school in Bayreuth, that a lot of his friends were getting into a drug called crystal meth. Well, that's kind of interesting. We spoke to a guy at a Suchtklinik in Bayreuth. He said, yep, it's happening. There's shitloads of people taking crystal meth here. You should come and do a documentary. We said, okay. We went along there. We actually went to the Festspiel and we found one. You wouldn't think this was kind of a joke. We just thought we'd go there, it'd be funny, But actually, we found a woman here who was attending the premiere of the Bayreuth Festspiele, who actually said, yeah, my son's friends all do it, which was quite shocking. After this, we went into a town called Hof, which is also called Seestadt, or Crystalstadt. And we spoke to, we didn't know what to do. This is also the way we produce. We don't necessarily have a formatted show. We don't say we're going to do interview A and B and C, and then we're going to do the montage, and then we're going to do the little Bildstrecke with the music. We don't do that. So we just said, okay, let's go to Hof. It sounds like Seestadt. It sounds kind of dangerous and weird. If we're going to find crystal meth anywhere, we'll probably find it there. We were walking around in the Fußgängerzone on a Saturday afternoon in Hof. And we just asked a bunch of kids who were hanging around, like, hey, know where we can get any crystal meth? Yes, we do. We spoke to a guy who was just coming down from his latest weekend, or his latest week, I should say, of being high. He then took us to his friend's place, picked up the meth. We met again in a Tiefgarage, where they proceeded to pack out their meth and do it for us in front of the camera. It was rather shocking. They then said, look, this is nothing. We can go and you can meet our friends. They just got out of rehab. Okay, yeah, they're like 16-year-old girls. Okay, that's also very interesting. They took us to this Spielplatz. They took us to a Spielplatz, and we spoke to them. And what I like about this particular piece is Manu's reaction to that. We had a big discussion with ZDF, and that's the nicest thing about working together with public TV stations. We always discuss things a lot, but it's really cool. Because you really get an understanding about what works and what doesn't work, but not necessarily for the user feedback, but just because you're talking to experienced people who know what they're doing. This is the clip. Oh, that's that.
Rumgesponnen einfach. Ja, wie heißt Hochaugenfigur, wie das Seestadt. Ja, dass man wirklich von jedem in Reaction. Ja, und es nehmen auch Jüngere, also zum Beispiel auch mit 13 die Leute das schon. Mit 13? Die hören auch mit Kiffen und sind stolz drauf, dass sie dann mit Crystal angefangen haben. Ich finde es echt krass, was irgendwie so erzählt. So wie die Funken und so. Hat halt echt irgendwie schon ganz schön heftige Sachen so zu erzählen überlegt. Ich habe jetzt wieder ein bisschen gepasst, eben mit den beiden Jungs im Parkhaus. Fand ich einfach wahnsinnig krass. Seine Beine bringt ihm das Dope zum Ziehen, ermutigt ihn, sie wollen damit aufhören. Wir haben die Droge im Griff, das hat er noch gesagt. Für mich sieht das leider genau nach dem Gegenteil aus. Und mit den beiden Mädchen, die da schaukeln auf dem Spielplatz, das ist alles. Das ist einfach, ich weiß gar nicht, wie man das sagen soll, das ist einfach bitter. Also, es ist wirklich der Realitätsverlust. Und ich hoffe einfach nur, dass ich gerade von den ganzen Sachen verstörter bin und das vielleicht viel zu intensiv wahrnehme, aber ich weiß nicht, ob das so ist.
So for me, that's powerful TV. Maybe the children's music in the background was a bit too much, retrospectively. But that should hopefully give you an impression of what we like. We like young people just being honest in front of the camera about what they're seeing in a situation where it's happening. The girls are behind him and the swings. It's just nice. I have to hurry up. So I just want to show you one quote from one of my favorite filmmakers, a German guy called Werner Herzog. We often get into discussions about facts and how important facts are for documentaries and for TV shows. Facts are incredibly important, but they are not a story. A story is compiled of lots of different things. I think emotion is probably the most important, but you can't have that. You can't have that subjective connection or identification with a topic or a person if you don't have facts, you know. This is feelings help me relate was something I wrote late last night, I think in my hotel room. I think I was just feeling a bit sad. But it's true, like if you have that emotional connection, if you see someone like Manuel say that in front of a camera looking right at you, I feel it. And the 200,000 people who watched that episode on YouTube, which was uploaded illegally by someone, and thank you ZDF for not taking that down, would agree with me. You know, it was moving, and they all wrote that in the comments. Yeah, so like while Germany got 200,000 views on YouTube, that episode, it got a quarter, or a Marktanteil from 0, irgendwas. It wasn't good, but it was good. It was good. It was good for the show. It was good, but it's just when you put it in contrast to the YouTube numbers, it just shows you how powerful those platforms are right now if you're trying to appeal to young people. Okay, so this is just a quote. The film, I don't know if you know it, probably. It's called The Act of Killing. It was won the Publikumspreis at the Berlinale this year by a young filmmaker, American guy called Joshua Oppenheimer. We interviewed Werner Herzog and Errol Morris, 2 filmmakers who are executive producers on the film, and we asked them about documentary filmmaking, and I just wanted to show it to you because I like these guys, and I think they say cool stuff.
Leave the documentary filmmaking, and I'm one of the great advocates, has to move away from the pure fact-based movies, because facts per se do not constitute truth. That's a big, big, big mistake. Otherwise, the Manhattan phone directory would be the book of books. 4 million entries, every single one factually correct. Mr. Jonathan Smith, his address and telephone number can be verified, they are correct. But whether he has nightmares or whether he cries into his pillow each night, we do not know. And that's where filmmaking has to move.
Right on. Right on. Yeah, so I agree with Werner there. And just one final thing, this is the film Act of Killing. It's about Indonesian death squads who were killing communists. And it's about those guys who were never punished and how they deal with their trauma. And this is one final thing from the other executive producer of that show, a guy called Errol Morris, who's a filmmaker, and is actually the dad of a guy who works in our office, who writes, actually produces another show, a drug show for us. And this is a summary of all the stuff that I just said. But this clip, I think, is much, much better. I'm going to start again.
I got into an argument with one critic about the act of killing, who said that he knew even less about the genocide in Indonesia after seeing the movie than he did before. And I tried to tell him that whatever documentary is, it's not adult education. Presumably, it's an art form where we are trying to communicate something about the real world. There's a journalistic component, but it's properly considered, to me, journalism plus something more than journalism. You're entering into the idea of something, exploring the idea of something. In this particular instance, what if you committed a terrible crime but you were rewarded for it? What if 40 years pass? What ultimately is the effect it has on your life, on who you are and how you see yourself? Which is really at the heart of this movie, which makes it, to me, great.
Thanks.